Okay. I've gone back and forth on this video so many times, but I it is Suicide Awareness Month, and I used to work a lot in suicide assessment and prevention. I posted a video on TikTok the other day, and this is an issue that has impacted me personally in different ways, and and I know a lot of people who have been impacted by this themselves in different ways, and so you know, I went back and forth about whether I should dive deeper into this or make another video about it for here, but I think I'm doing this because in part because of a conversation that I had with a friend who's struggling with an anniversary that was yesterday. Um and among other things, and some of the things that came up for in conversations that they had with other people, um, that reflect other things that have come up in conversations I've had with people, or that I observe, where there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of shame, and there's a lot of guilt around all sorts of aspects of this. And so I think I want to address some of those um, some of those aspects and shed some light on that, because I think it's important for people to have that witnessing and validation, and have a space to and open a door to have conversations that are going to be more clear and supportive. Excuse me, because I think a lot of people a lot of people are afraid to talk about suicide and death and what that means and why it happens, and you know all of the things, all of and and confronting some of the truths that might reveal about humanity, about people that they care about themselves. um and that's not an easy it's not an easy thing to look at. And so we're gonna look at it though. We're gonna look at it a little bit. And so before I get into it, I have some resources in the description box. I'm gonna trust you to take care of yourself, and not engage with this any further if this is too raw or too present for you right now. I think this is not a conversation for somebody who is actively in this space of either grief or ideation. Um, so, or in a sort of nearing crisis level. So I'm going to trust you to know yourself and take care of yourself. Because this is not advice. You know, this is not professional advice. This is just me talking as a person, who has been impacted by this and who has been in this space, in and out of this space in different ways, right? And so it's just one person's perspective. Um, so with that out of the way, I think you know there are things that I get frustrated by professionals and lay people alike, like the average person, like community members, which is this highly reactionary response to anybody who expresses ideation, or who expresses that they don't want to be here anymore, because the way our system is built is not actually built to help people in a safe way. Um, it immediately strips them of their choice, in terms of how they want to engage with help and with support, and how they want to navigate it, in the sense of, as a clinician, I was a mandated reporter. I am a mandated reporter. And so if someone expresses, you know, I would assess, right? I would do an assessment. And if I was worried that they were at risk, if they were at risk, then I would have to, you know, call 911, call an ambulance, and suggest that they go to a hospital, right? Like it's a little, it's not always quite that immediate or quite that reactive, but that is what we were trained to do, which is a problem, I think, in a lot of ways. Is we don't. Let me just, suicide assessments and understanding suicide was not core curriculum in my program, in my clinical social work program, and it's not core curriculum. It's not like standard curriculum. There might be some places that include it as part of their curriculum, but it's not. Um, it's not standard. We talk about it like a little bit. There was like one lesson. We had like one lesson on it, but really getting into it was not core curriculum. It was not a requirement. So there are clinicians who come out and the only training they get on it is on the job, and not every job does this well, right? Maybe they use the screening tool, the Columbia screening tool, and that's a good tool. It's a validated tool, and it's a good guide for people. But most of the issue around doing suicide assessments, or addressing it, has nothing to do with asking the right questions and everything to do with our own issues, bias, and discomfort around having a conversation about death with somebody who is in a vulnerable and sensitive place, and especially somebody who's in a lot of pain. Because people who are thinking about this are in a lot of pain. That is where this is coming from. And it's often the type of pain that we don't formally acknowledge or validate. It's emotional pain, it's soul pain, it's psychological pain. It's a pain that is hard to articulate because we haven't given ourselves permission to talk about it in certain cultures and in certain societies. So we don't have the language to talk about it. And so if you don't know how to talk about it, that's why. It's valid, right? And we find a way, but it's a pain, and because we don't have the language to talk about it, it's hard for that pain to be witnessed, especially if the person you're talking to hasn't experienced that kind of pain for themselves at some point in their life. Maybe they didn't necessarily, maybe they never became suicidal, but the part of witnessing and empathy isn't necessarily knowing another person's experience or putting yourself in their shoes. It's recognizing the emotion that they're trying to describe, the feeling that they're trying to describe, and recognizing what that emotion or experience feels like for you, and then having that acknowledgement, right? Or if you don't know it, and acknowledging that. Sometimes that's still good enough, I'd much rather have someone say to me, I don't know what that feels like, but man, tell me more, or well, let's do you what would yeah, tell me more or whatever, and I'm a verbal person, so the tell me more works wonders on me sometimes, but for others it's man, I was just saying, I don't know what that feels like, but I'm glad that you told me about it, right? That kind of a thing. I'm glad that you shared, and I hope you keep, if you want to keep talking about it, let's keep talking about it. Or if you want to go do something more fun or distracting or whatever, to get your mind off of it, let's do that. Let's explore, let's figure something out, that feels supportive to you. That's not about fixing it, because it's not a pain that's easy to fix. It's about acknowledging it. And, I think, and this is where it gets tricky, because I'm of the belief that we cannot resolve a wound or a pain or an experience or something that haunts us or that ails us or that burdens us if we're not willing to acknowledge it, and acknowledging it makes it real. And sometimes we are hoping that it's just not real and that it'll go away on its own, or that, someone can be like, oh no, that's not a real thing, and then it will magically like make it disappear. Like the monster under the bed, right? Where you like oh my god, there's a monster under the bed, and then you go and you look and there's no monsters under the bed, and you're like, okay, great, like there's no monsters under the bed. That was easy. But I don't know, like, and I don't know about you, but I've had the experience where I'm just like, I don't know, it still feels like there's like, logically I know there's no monsters under the bed, but it still feels like there are. Like, so my imagination is very active. So what? Like, how do I coach myself? Like I just have to keep coaching myself that it's not real, it's not real, it's not real, right? Until I believe it. Um and sometimes that can be helpful, and sometimes that's just gaslighting, and it doesn't actually help you because you're denying something true, right? You're denying an experience that is true and valid and real to you. And so I think that is important, and part of what makes this hard, these conversations hard, and part of what makes navigating this hard wherever you stand in the experience, because to address it, to work through it, you have to acknowledge it. Acknowledging it makes it real, and when it's real, then what, right? It's like, oh my god, what happens if it's real? Like, then you have to acknowledge that something happened that was hard to make sense of, right? Or that wasn't fair, or that shouldn't have happened, or the person who was involved in that, um, you know, wasn't who we wanted them to be or who we believed them to be, right? Or couldn't be the person we needed them to be. Um, there's so much, there's so much that comes up, right? There's so many things, because it challenges our belief system. It challenges the stories that we are telling ourselves that feel foundational, right? Like, um, if this isn't true, like, if this is real, right? If this pain is real, then that means that I have been carrying it, or that it comes from this real place, or that I don't know how to make it go away. Or I am somebody who experiences pain, and that's not the story that I've been telling myself. I don't want to be this person. But if this is real, then I am that person. So what am I supposed to do with that, right? Like, what does that mean? And like, what does it mean to be this person that I don't want to be, or that I think I don't want to be? And this is where we have to, like, this is where it's so context specific and nuanced, right? I feel like I'm speaking a bit abstractly, but it's learning how to move through that, because again, you have it, like, we have this story or this perception of what it means to be that person versus this person. And maybe that story isn't true, or it doesn't have to be true for you. You know what I mean? And that can really wreck the way that learned to make meaning, or the way that we've been coping with our lives, because it's this existential thing. It's this existential crisis that unfolds of, like, who am I really, and who are these people, and what does this mean, and like, and what is my place in the world now, or like, where do I belong, or where do I fit in, or is it possible for me to fit in or to belong? All of these, like, these are really big questions that we ask ourselves, and that we, like, a lot of people avoid because they're afraid of the answer. And so I think, one, having, like, I want to help create spaces where we can have those conversations, right? Where we can ask those questions in a way that feels safe enough to go past them, right? Where we don't, like, okay, let's, like, you are this person, you are this person, And so like let's talk about like what does that mean to you? What are your worst fears about being this kind of person? What does it mean to be that kind of person to you? Is that true? Does that have to be true? Where does that story come from? You know? And so like I'm really great at asking I'm really great at like bringing up these like philosophical questions to ask, um and not offering a lot of answers because because again it's going to be context and person specific. And and it and this is the challenge because in my paradigm, the way that I navigate and have learned to sort of work through my own pain, like I had to work through some of these things before I could get to the place where I could release the pain, or where it felt safe enough to let the things go that were only weighing me down or causing me harm. You know what I mean? Or um, or contributing to my suffering in some way. Like I had to work through these questions, these different questions for myself first, because like I had to confront my fears, right? It's it's that other euphemism of usually, the thing you desire most is on the other side of fear or something like that. Um, there's an element of that, of facing your fear. And unfortunately, what happens for a lot of people is that whether like, they have been in situations where facing their fears hasn't been safe, confrontation wasn't safe, or it looked a certain way. And regardless of whether they are still in that environment or not, if that gets internalized, then it is really difficult to find that sense of safety that allows you to face those fears, to confront those truths, to feel supported in that for different reasons. And so, what we can do for each other is learn to recognize what that safety feels like, what that safety means, and how to offer that space to the people in our lives, to the people that we care about, to the people that we want to support, or that we're trying to support in different ways. It's because like at the end of the day, you know, there is nothing I can do or say in this video, especially that is going to make anybody's pain immediately go away, right? There's nothing I can do or say in this video that is going to fix the grief, the sorrow, the anguish that someone is experiencing in this moment. Not with, especially not without being face to face, right? Like, because I don't know where it's coming from. I just know that it's real to you, and that's like, and it's okay that it's real. It's okay that it's real. And I also know that you don't have to do this alone. It often feels like you do. And there are lots of people who are really quick to judge, who are really quick to make all sorts of wild claims about what it means to feel grief, or um, to die, to suffer with suicidal ideation, right? Um, and self harm. There are people like there's like the world is full of people who are ignorant and afraid and who say all sorts of stupid, inconsiderate shit, that just make you feel worse about yourself, right? Like there's no shortage of that in the world, right? Um, and so, you know, fuck them, you know, with love and grace, like, but like, anybody who is, making you feel unseen, unheard, and judged, you know, like sometimes there are people that we care about and they just don't have the skills, right? Like it's not, I don't, when I say like being cheeky, but like that's not, it's not your problem, you know? Um, you don't need to add their ignorance to your burdens necessarily, like, right? Like there are spaces, there are people, there are ways to navigate this and release the emotions that feel really overwhelming in ways that are not so final, you know, um, for you. So, hopefully for the emotions to a certain extent, but emotions, just like everything comes in waves, everything comes in cycles. You know, grief is a tricky mistress. Um, like I have lost people that I cared about, and and either didn't cry or cried at like a really weird time, like where it's like, oh, where is this coming from or what's happening? Um, and there are people that I've lost where like I couldn't eat for 3 days. You know what I mean? Like it's and the correlation between who those people were to me and like what you would expect is not so obvious, right? Um, so like grief is going to hit you differently in different circumstances with different people. All of it is valid, right? And everybody grieves in their own way, which I know like is a thing that people talk about all the time, but it's true, and it comes in cycles. And there is such a thing as complicated grief, which is sort of like a traumatic, it's like a traumatic response to grief where you get kind of stuck in a cycle of grief for a prolonged period of time. Um, and and that might require more, focused attention. But generally speaking, like if there's an anniversary of someone that you lost, of course you're going to feel sad, right? Or of course, like it's going to be a hard day, especially if you lost them tragically or unexpected, if their loss hit you in that way, um, you know, and or if there was if you had really conflicted emotions about that person and what it meant to lose them, like you might like this is the thing like sometimes people on anniversaries of certain events or certain situations, it's like I don't want to remember this, like, or I don't want to feel like it happened, it's done, like I'm over it, right? Like, but then the anniversary comes up and you're like, why am I in such a mood today? Or why can't this just like leave me alone, right? Why can't I forget that this date is this date? And and part of that is it's like it's a memory. Like we form internal body memories, especially when something affects us significantly. And so, my general advice is like figure out what kind of ritual works for you to release the thing that you need to release, whether that's honoring the person and the relationship that you had, whether that is honoring your anger or whatever conflicted emotions come up, um, or finding ways to distract yourself to recondition the memory and like essentially build new memories in a different way. And that is something that like this is the other thing that I sort of want to address as somebody who has been on sort of both ends of this spectrum. If you love somebody, if there's someone that you care about who is struggling with something, it is a very natural response to want to swoop in and take care of them and nurture them or protect them or avenge them or whatever the case might be, to fix whatever it is, to make their pain go away, because it is hard to watch someone we care about suffer in any way. And sometimes we can't control that, which is that's one of those hard truths, that's one of those hard realities that is difficult to accept or face or acknowledge in some way. We can't control what the people we care about experience. We can't control what happens to them. Like that is putting them in a cage, that is forcing them to be small, and that only reinforces fear, right? It reinforces this idea that, that they are like they're too precious, they're too fragile to handle the realities of the world, you know? And so that's a risk. And that's part of the risk of loving somebody or something, right? It's the same reason, like, with our pets. Like, I have 2 cats who I love dearly, and I know that I will outlive them, you know, like, or that something could happen to, and I let, one of my cats loves to go outside and wander the yard, and I let her do that because it's safe enough, right? Like, I live in a place where, she has the space to do that, and it's something that she loves to do, even though it's like, yeah, something terrible could happen to her, right? Like, something terrible, she could get hit by a car, she could get stolen. There's so many terrible things that could happen, but I have to, like, and eventually they're gonna die. Like, both of them are gonna die, and I'm choosing to love them anyway. Like, I'm choosing to open my heart to that risk and that fear, and honoring, their personalities and what they represent in my life. And so, you know, people are not pets, you know, um, and we still have, like, the emotional attachment that we feel, the love that we feel. Like, our body doesn't necessarily know the difference, and it's the same thing. Like, we cannot, as much as we would love to, we cannot shield the people that we love from the realities of the world forever and ever without harming them in the process in a different way. And so what that means is giving space to people, letting them choose, supporting them through or guiding them through making the choices that are going to be the most supportive to what they need, right? So if there is an anniversary coming up, like, if you making the offer, right? You can try things, like, you can try a distraction, you can plan something, but if they say they don't want to do it, right? If they're wanting to spend that day differently, if they're wanting to do something different, honor that, respect their choice, because so often when it comes to like the issue of suicide, um, when it comes to the issue of grief, when it comes to the ways that we carry and navigate our pain, especially when it's something that feels overwhelming and that's something that becomes chronic or something that we feel like we're dealing with all the time or struggling to release. A lot of that has to do with the ways in which our autonomy or our choices were either severely limited, if not violated, at some point in our lives. And that is another one of those hard realities to acknowledge, and a difficult wound to heal from. And again, why I go back to look at the places where you have choice, no matter how small or mundane it may seem, and honor and honor the choices that you make. Do that consciously and start opening yourself up to all of the different areas in your life where you have choice. Because it's easy to feel overwhelmed. It's easy to feel like we don't have choices. It's easy to feel like things are impossible or the mountain is too, rough to climb. and it might be rough. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying that that there aren't realities that are, you know, extremely limiting or challenging. And, and maybe it's not about scaling the mountain, but there might be a spot on the mountain that's actually quite lovely to like sit and hang out and take in the view and, enjoy, versus like being on the cliff face where you're getting battered by wind and rain and sleet and all of the things, right? Like, there might be shelter somewhere within the mountain that you can get to, even if scaling it is not realistic, right? Or is not something that feels accessible to you. And then who knows? Maybe that will change over time. That's the thing, is life evolves, our world evolves, we evolve. Our core selves might not change, but our circumstances can, our environments can, our context can, and don't minimize the impact that can have, um, and the different forms that can take. So I don't know if this was helpful. I don't know. I'm hoping that this was helpful, um, because I really just don't. Hmm, I don't like the way that we have some of these conversations where it's either trying to rush to solutions to fix the problem, or speaking at a superficial level that feels, like pandering or infantilizing, um, or invalidating, or that reinforces stigma, um, and invalidates people's experience in different ways. I think the more spaces we can create to for people to feel safe enough to just be who they are and be honest about their experience, you know, the better the world will be, and that can take many different forms, and it doesn't always have to look like talk therapy. It doesn't have to look like, spilling all of your inner turmoil, you know, verbally to somebody, especially if you're not sure how to articulate something, because sometimes we don't have the language to talk about what we're experiencing. And sometimes that's by design. Like, we just don't we've stigmatized something so much that we don't have the language to talk about it. And but having a space where you can just be yourself and be flawed and be welcomed and be received and be held in whatever it is that you're going through, those spaces are precious and valuable, and we need a lot more of them, because they're missing. They're missing, where we have them in these, like, little pockets, um, or like in these sort of online spaces, but we need more and more of them in person, in real life, where we can be with each other, um, and have that human contact. So anyway, that's my final little plug for, supportive spaces. And yes, I hope this was helpful. I hope this wasn't too activating for anybody. Again, there are resources in the description box, um, for if you need someone to talk to, if there's things that you want to learn more about, if you're trying to sort of navigate some of this, check those out and be kind to each other, support one another, and I will see you when I see you.